I want to ask you a personal question. Do you read my newsletter, Leadership Forward 321? Because if you don't, I really think you'd like it if you like this podcast. Every Wednesday morning, I send a short newsletter designed to help you lead your organization more strategically and with less overwhelm in 5 minutes or less. The newsletters are organized around a timely leadership theme and give you something practical that you can apply right away in your organization. I include three of the best articles that I've come across on that theme, two concrete resources or tools that I believe in, and one quote to inspire and motivate you. So if you don't yet get the newsletter, I'm going to make it super easy for you to sign up. Just text the word impact to 66866 and you'll be added to my list. Thanks. Hi, welcome to the Nonprofit Mastermind podcast, where every week I do a deep dive into the strategies and mindset behind launching, scaling, and leading a high-impact nonprofit. I'm your host, Brooke Richie-Babbage. Working to make the world a more just and beautiful place is messy, complex, heart-wrenching, and ultimately deeply joyful and fulfilling work. And none of us can do it alone. That's why I started this podcast, this Mastermind community, to hold space for and share the learnings and the questions and the grapplings and the actual concrete strategies that allow us to move our social impact work forward together. So welcome to the Mastermind. I'm so glad you're here. Hello. Welcome to Tuesday and to this week's episode of the Nonprofit Mastermind podcast. This week, I'm going to do one of my strategy quick tips. I'm going to offer one strategy and a couple tools for actually figuring out who you should be aiming your fundraising energy at over the summer, figuring out your ideal donors, who they are, and why that's so important. So, a bit of background or context. 2 weeks ago, I joined forces with four of my absolute favorite people in the nonprofit space on a project called Road Trip. Jess Campbell, Cindy Wagman, Ria Wong, Rachel Beerbauer, and I offered a 2-hour series of 20-minute fundraising mini trainings, each one focused on a specific topic designed to give people who came to the training like a roadmap for how to use the summer months to prepare for year-end fundraising. The idea is we go on this road trip through these different topics. Summer is a little more spacious. There's a little more time. The days last longer. A lot of organizations use this time for planning and for preparing for the fall. And we thought, what's top of mind for folks at the end of the year-end fundraising. And these are great months to actually lay some groundwork for really effective year-end fundraising. So that's what we decided to come together and do. We each focused on a different topic, and it was a smash hit. It was so much fun to create and work on. These are, like I said, four of my absolute favorite women. We do a lot of work together, and they do really incredible work, and each of their trainings was great. I also really liked mine. It was on donor attraction. I mention it here for two reasons. First, because you can get the replay and watch all 5 fundraising trainings for $47 at brookerichiebabbage.com/road trip. So I'm going to leave that training available. The replay will be there indefinitely. It's a great 2 hours. Each person offers their own, not just training, but tool that goes with the training. So you can get that at brookerichiebabbage.com/road trip. So I mention it for that reason. The second reason I mention it is because it actually inspired the quick tip that I'm going to offer today, figuring out who your ideal donors are. So we've all heard that fundraising works best when it's relational. Everybody says that. It's not transactional, it's relational. That is particularly important as your organization grows and gets bigger. But here's what that actually means in practice. It means that your donors are in a bi-directional relationship with your organization. It is not you presenting information, you running campaigns, you hosting cultivation events aimed at them. Like that's unidirectional. And what you get from a unidirectional relationship or transaction is a transaction, right? You aim something at donor and they give you money in return. A bidirectional relationship is actually one in which both people offer and receive. So in a bidirectional relationship with your organization, the donors contribute funds and support, and the organization gives them an opportunity to participate in having an impact on the world that they care very deeply about. It's an invitation to join an effort, to be part of something that they care a lot about. That is what you are offering donors. That's a legitimate part of a relationship, right? Each person brings something to the table. Each entity brings something to the table. So that last part, the impact that they care very deeply about, that last part is really key. The most effective fundraising enters a conversation that's already happening inside the minds of your ideal donors. And it tries to see the world the way they see it. It does not try to convince people to see the world the way your organization thinks they should see it, even if the way that you think they should see it is wonderful and makes sense. I think, one of the things I struggled the most with when I first started fundraising as a founder, and I think this happens a lot with founders, is that I understood how I had come to the work that I was doing with young people. I had been a lawyer, I had done organizing work, I had done policy work. I had and have a lot of very deeply held beliefs and feelings and thoughts about how the law interacts with the lives of people living in poverty. And that was very important to me. That was very central to my story about why I was doing the work that I was doing. And most of my language, my messaging, my initial early websites used that frame. That was the movie in my head. That was the conversation with the world happening in my head. My fundraising got a lot better when I was able to step outside of my movie and realize that there were lots of different conversations happening in the minds of the people who were supporting my organization, some of which had to do with law and policy and anti-poverty work, some of which had to do with youth development, some of which had to do with living in New York City as a young people and interacting with various government agencies. My fundraising got better when I tried to meet people in the world that they lived in, right? Entered that conversation. At the root of this, what you want to do is find people who have an affinity for your mission, right? That movie in their head is about an impact that your organization is working towards. Find people that have a deep connection to the outcomes that your organization is working towards, a shared vision of the better world that you're working to create, that shared affinity. That's when my fundraising got really good, was I realized that at the core of what I was trying to connect to with my donors and my funders was not the sort of surface level, what are the books that we read? It's, we're trying to build a more just world. And we believe this is where theory of change becomes really important, right? For those folks who work with me, they probably are tired of hearing me talk about how important the theory of change is, because this is really about saying, we believe that there's a way to get to this better world. And that's what people tap into, that affinity for the mission, for the theory of change, for the shared sort of vision of impact. That's everything in the fundraising relationship. That is everything. And what that means is that your fundraising, like mine, will become increasingly successful the better you are at connecting with people who have that affinity or shared passion in a way that they are ready to hear you. And honestly, ignoring everyone else. I always remind the folks that I work with that there's no such thing as fundraising for everyone. Particularly with earlier stage organizations, I have a lot of conversations around fundraising where I have to sort of convince people that the idea is not to try to be as broad as possible in their outreach, right? To reach as many people as possible. That fundraising for everyone is really fundraising for no one. You're going to connect to far fewer people, ironically. You want to remember that donors are people, and all people are different, every single person, right? That sounds trite, but we can forget that when we're, running fundraising campaigns that are aimed at groups of people. Each individual is different. And the more you're able to connect with people on a personal level and really get inside their heads, the more effective your fundraising is going to be. And that's why mass fundraising tactics don't work as well as intentional, targeted engagement and cultivation tactics and strategies. So my strategy quick tip for today is about how to begin to operationalize all of this. How do you actually identify your ideal donor? Some people call this a donor archetype or a donor avatar. You want to craft a donor profile, right? A profile of your ideal donor. So the last thing that I'm going to say before I actually give the strategy is that everyone wants to skip this. Everyone. There are different versions of wanting to skip this. Some people don't buy it at all, right? We don't really need a donor avatar. They don't really buy the idea that you don't want to fundraise for as many people as possible. I've already talked about why there are problems with that. But wanting to skip it shows up in other ways too. So just sort of note if some of this is coming up for you as you're listening. People want to back of the envelope this, right? Use their instinct. I know who my donors are. I have a good sense of who the donors are. I have a good sense of why people are giving or why people aren't giving or who the kinds of people are that would want to give. Do not do that. Don't do that. Do the thing that I'm going to recommend instead. If you don't act with intentionality around crafting these donor profiles, your organization is going to waste time, money, and energy coming up with cultivation events and fundraising campaigns for the wrong people or focused on the wrong themes, and you're just going to get less support. So I have a free toolkit with worksheets for all of the things that I'm talking about. It's free. You can get it at brookerichiebabbage.com/donor attraction. It walks through strategies for finding the right people, identifying the right people, and worksheets for the strategy that I'm going to talk about here, which is one that is a great strategy to implement during the summer. Get you ready for the fall, and it's probably the most powerful strategy for developing a deep understanding of your support community that I've ever used or come across, and it's so simple. It's an interview, the stakeholder interview. So that is my strategy quick tip for today. Do stakeholder interviews during the summer. 3 steps. First, start with making a list of people who have demonstrated this kind of affinity for your mission that I was talking about. These are current donors. If you have current donors, fantastic. Make a list of the ones who have given most consistently and most recently. Your board members, present and past. And think about other stakeholders who have committed in some way. Program partners are really great. If you have institutional program partners that have demonstrated, right, an affinity for your mission and the impact you're trying to bring about. So make a list and then draft your interview questions and do these in advance, because while this is definitely a conversation, you're going to be reaching out to the people on your list and actually asking if you can ask them some questions. This is a fact-seeking endeavor, and you want to be clear about that up front. Think about questions like the following. Tell me about the kinds of organizations that you choose to donate money to. What do they have in common? What are you really passionate about for those organizations? What are your biggest concerns in the world? And think about, as you're listening to their answers, how these relate to your nonprofit's mission and work and theory of change. Another great question. If I could wave a magic wand and get you the results that you're after in the world, the kind of impact you want to have, what would that impact look like? What would those outcomes look like for the population that you care most about? Another question. What other organizations have you been involved with that are similar to this one? Why did you decide to donate to us? That is a great place to start with current donors. And another one is, what are you looking for when you donate to a cause? Right? So these are just examples of the kinds of questions that you want to ask. The point is to learn about their interests, their needs. What do they expect in a relationship with an organization that they support? What concerns do they have about the world, about giving, about your organization in particular? This is a great time to dig into questions, points of confusion, and concerns that people might have. What passions do they have? What lights them up, right? You are just asking questions. You are taking in information as they relate to your organization and its work. And then the third thing you want to do is, after you have these notes, you're just listening, taking in information. You want to organize your notes in a way that illuminates themes and common trends. That's how you're going to start to see the sort of profiles or the groupings of the psychographics of people that want to give to your organization. And a lot of folks, when they're doing sort of donor profile work, focus on demographics. Are they, what is their gender? What is their age, marital status, race and ethnicity? Those things may or may not be important, but I have always found them to be far more important as they relate to and intersect with psychographics, right? The fact that I am a parent is meaningless outside of the psychology that I use or approach or attach to being a parent. I know lots of parents, we all feel very differently about parenting in a lot of ways. So putting me in a bucket of, oh, she might be interested in this because she's a parent, isn't really going to give you much information. You have to really get into, what does it mean to me to be a parent? What are my thoughts and concerns and feelings? What do I attach psychologically to being a parent? Just using that as an example. So that is just a warning to be careful about leaning too heavily into demographics without tying them to psychographics. And what you're trying to get to with these questions is the psychology, right? The interests, the needs, the concerns, questions, and passions of your current donors, your current stakeholders. And honestly, even people, it would be great to add people to that list that you think should want to donate, right? That you think would be great donors. You could see a real affinity, and you want to figure out if your theory is correct. So I included in the donor attraction toolkit, the free one at brookerichiebabbage.com/donor attraction, something called an empathy map. And it's a really great tool that helps capture and organize this kind of data, this kind of sort of psychological, psychographic data. And it's inside the toolkit. So those are the 3 steps to take to develop a really robust donor profile. I wanted to keep it simple this week. Going into summer, the last thing people need is a lot of stuff to do. But I'm going to reiterate, I'm going to say this again. Everybody wants to skip this. And I really, really recommend not skipping. Even if you just did 3 of these conversations. 5 is better. More is better. Even if you just did 3, you will learn so much more that will inform your fundraising at the end of the year. And the summer is the perfect time to have these conversations. People are feeling more leisurely and more spacious with their time, and you'll go into the fall more prepared than ever. So that's my strategy quick tip for the week. You can go even deeper on this with the 5 trainings in the roadmap replay. $47, brookerichiebabbage.com/road trip. And you can get the free toolkit that walks through what I talked about today at brookerichiebabbage.com/donor attraction. I will see you back here next week for more Mastermind. Have a great week. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of the Nonprofit Mastermind podcast. If you liked this podcast, I would also love for you to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you think that what we talk about here could benefit another leader in your life, please share with your friends. Finally, if you'd like more leadership in your life, you can sign up for my weekly 5-minute read Leadership Forward 321 newsletter. I send articles, resources, and inspiration every week curated around a leadership theme to help you lead your nonprofit better. You can sign up at richiebabbage.com/leadership forward 321. That's it for this week. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you back here next week for more Mastermind.